friends and people that we've known now for quite some time. It's a very holy time of year, Navratri, obviously, and Gandhiji's birthday. And just this past week, not only the birthday, but also the Mahasamadhi of our great Guru, Lahiri Mahashaya. And so today, Devi and I will primarily talk about Lahiri. He was such a very, very great saint, an avatar really, and he had a very special role to play in the evolution of the consciousness of the planet. You all know the story of, as related in the autobiography of a yogi, of him being called to the, first of all, to Raniket, was sent there by the railroad that he worked for. But then there wasn't much work for him to do. And so he would wander in the countryside. And one day wandering, he heard a voice calling him. And he wandered farther and farther and higher up near Dromgiri mountain. And there he met Babaji. Babaji had created the job, especially for Lahiri, and had called him to him. And at that time, he asked him if he remembered him. And Lahiri, such is the play of God. And we all, every great saint's life is symbolic. And we have to look at the events of their life, not only as an event that happened on a personal level, but symbolically, they are living a life to show us how to live properly. And so Lahiri, up until that time, even though he was very spiritual growing up, he had a period of time where it was almost a little bit like he had been asleep, or not quite aware of his life's mission. One time Swamiji asked Master about that, because these great souls, they're in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And Swami said, but don't you always know what's going on? And Master said, yes, we do know what's going on. But it's like watching a movie that you've already seen. While you're doing that, you suspend the memory of that movie so that you can enjoy it as if seeing it for the first time. And so being in the highest state of Samadhi, of course they know what's going on. But such is the play of God, that, and the model of Lahiri, that apparently he didn't remember. He didn't remember Babaji. He didn't know quite why he was there. It seemed that he was wandering, as we do, in a little bit of a fog. And so he was enacting out for all of us the kind of drama that we have. And Babaji tapped him on the forehead and then put him into a state of samadhi. And of course then he remembered Babaji, threw himself at his feet, because Babaji had been waiting for him during this whole incarnation. And Lahiri said, where do you find this kind of love anywhere in this world? And he stayed there for some time. But as I say, this is symbolic, because we too, one of the deep teachings of this path is that we are not this body and personality. The drama that we think that we're, the life that we think that we're leading, the drama that we think that we're leading, is not real. It's kind of a miasma over the consciousness. And at some time, when our soul is ready to be reawakened, then Babaji or Lahiri or Master or our Guru or Divine Mother, somehow the Divine, because it's all the Divine will awaken us. And at that time, we will remember who we really are. And so Lahiri was reenacting that drama that we will all enact at some point. He was ready from long ago. He came as a free soul. We come carrying baggage with us, carrying with us the desires, unfulfilled wishes, wanting this, wanting that. And as long as we're playing out the role with desires for things of this world, then God says, well, of course, this world is to help you achieve those desires. So incarnate and try to achieve your desire. If we have a desire for wealth, then God says incarnate. Incarnate until you have enough wealth, or you get tired enough seeking wealth, that you no longer have that desire. And eventually we will get to the point where we no longer have any desire for fulfillment on the material plane, because we will realize that the material plane can never fulfill our desire. Our happiness, our fulfillment comes within, not from anything outside of ourselves. So Lahiri had already reached that stage, and so his master, Babaji, awakened him at that time. And then the drama, I find, gets really fascinating, because Lahiri was there for some days in Samadhi, and he begged Babaji to allow him to stay there in the Himalayas with him, basically to stay there without any responsibilities other than to remain in a state of union with God. And Lahiri tells, Babaji tells Lahiri, it is not without reason that this miasma is over your mind, and that you have a wife and children and worldly responsibilities, and you have a job, and your role is to return to Varanasi and continue your job. I mean, how absurd is this drama in one sense? Here is perhaps the greatest avatar of his time. And Babaji says, go back and work for the British government as an accountant. How strange is that? Now, why would God do that? Because the age was coming where there had been an age before, during medieval times, in Kali Yuga. The times had been so dark that those who were really sincere spiritually couldn't hold a job. The world was too dark. They wouldn't stay in a job, and by and large, they were not married, and they would go to the Himalayas, or they would live in an ashram. In ancient times, this wasn't so. Rama and Sita, Krishna, all of the ancient times, but in the darker ages, the world is too unfriendly to our spiritual aspirations. And so, but now we're coming into a new age where we have to combine our spiritual aspirations and living what we would think of as a more normal life. See, the kind of life we lead, that is not the essence of the spiritual path. Whether we're a householder, a Himalayan yogi, whether we have this job or that job, that isn't the essence of the spiritual life. The essence of the spiritual life is to dissolve the ego, dissolve the sense of separation from God. And that can be done whether we're a householder or a Himalayan yogi, whether we work for the British government or have children. It doesn't matter. And that was the message that Lahiri was saying, that now the ages have changed, so that now we have to combine our spiritual search with a life with responsibilities in the world. Not for everyone. Master didn't do that. It depends on our individual karma, but Lahiri was saying that that will not prevent us from achieving the goal that we're trying to achieve, which is to dissolve the ego. And so Lahiri was sent back to Varanasi to lead a life, a model life of a yogi who worked during the day, made a modest income, supported his family, and yet his mind was still in the Himalayas, one might say. He would work during the day, he would come back in the evening, and he didn't sleep. He just carried on his Gita discourses. And quietly, great saints came to him for instruction, but also for upliftment, because it's vibration. Now, the second thing that happened, and is very important, and these two are tied together, is that Babaji empowered Lahiri to release Kriya Yoga into the world. And so up until that time, during the darker ages, Kali Yuga, Kriya was still known. It's been known from ancient times and practiced from ancient times. But it was known only to a few highly dedicated people who had basically no other responsibilities. And so now Lahiri was given the charge to teach Kriya Yoga. And he asked Babaji, Babaji said, teach it only to those highly advanced disciples that come to you. And Lahiri said, there are many sincere seekers. Can't I give Kriya, this sacred technique, to these sincere seekers? Because how will they become highly advanced if they don't have this technique? Now there is a story behind that, because Lahiri incarnated in part for this reason. He knew that we were coming into an age where it was going to be a more active age, a more restless age, and we needed a spiritual path that was quicker than going to the Himalayas and meditating many hours a day, chanting the name of God continuously, and so on. All of that is valid, but the men and women of today need a faster path. And so Lahiri came in order to bring Kriya Yoga into the world. And so that's what he did. And he initiated probably several thousand people, but very quietly. He didn't form a big organization. He didn't even write books. These souls were drawn to him. Sometimes they were drawn without even knowing why they were drawn. There's a story of a man who was a businessman in Calcutta, and all of a sudden, one day, one afternoon, he had this urge to take a trip. And he went to the train station, and he had a certain amount of rupees in his pocket. And he said to the station master, I have this many rupees, where will it take me? And the station master counted them out and said, well, it will take you to Varanasi. He said, okay, I'll go to Varanasi. And he goes to Varanasi, not knowing why he's there. Coming from Bengal, he asks about where the Bengali section of Varanasi is, and is directed. He goes there, and standing there waiting for him is Lahiri Mahasaya. Said, I called you to me because it was your time to receive Kriya Yoga. And so thousands came to Lahiri and received Kriya Yoga. Maharajas came, but all quietly, because that was the role, that it was Lahiri's role to train, essentially to train a whole series of great saints, among which were Yoganandaji's parents, and his guru, and his Sanskrit teacher. And so all of the important influences in Yoganandaji's life came through the line of Lahiri. Then it was Yoganandaji's mission to take Kriya Yoga and the teachings of India, the great Sanatana Dharma, the Vedic teachings, to take them to the West, because in his time, the time had now come not only to bring them away from a few highly advanced souls, but he said, I see the faces of many potential saints calling me from America. So it's the divine responding to the call of the divine, wanting enlightenment. And so Master comes and brings these great teachings to America, and from there they spread around the world. And so those teachings are what probably has drawn all of us together, that lineage that has come down that way. And so these great, great teachings are here, and Kriya Yoga specifically is here to help us advance. But what, again, does advance mean? It means essentially two things. One, it means that the entire mind and entire heart need to be turned toward God, because we need to withdraw our attachments, not from the world, because the world isn't what confuses us. The world, things aren't what confuse us. It's our attachment to those things, our desires for those things. And so, as Master said, we should live in the world, but not of the world. And so we can carry on our job, we can carry on our family life. All of that is fine. It's just that inwardly we need to use the techniques of yoga, and we need to turn our consciousness ever more toward God. And as we do that, deeper and deeper, then the desire to be separate from God begins to diminish until the desire to remain separate is very, very low, and the desire for union becomes high. As Master said, we get a sense of anguishing monotony with seeking something outside of ourselves which isn't there. And then the desire just to want to live a life for God, whether we're householders, whether we have children, no matter what. It's just turning the heart's energy, the desire toward God. And when that desire becomes overpowering and essentially burns away all other desires. When Swamiji was with Master, Swamiji liked good food, and he said to Master, "Oh, Master, I think that my desire for good food will hold me back." And Master said, "Don't worry about it. When ecstasy comes, all of those little petty desires go away." So it doesn't help us to run around and say, "Oh, I mustn't like ice cream. I mustn't like gulab jamun. I mustn't like this. I mustn't watch a movie. I mustn't do this." None of that is the essence of it. It just is that gradually we must turn our hearts and minds more and more toward God. And the practice of sadhana, the practice of Kriya Yoga, and gradually trying to live a life, Master said, a balanced life of meditation and service to other people. That cleans out those karmic tendencies and habit patterns that make us think that we can find fulfillment in the world. And as those habit patterns dissipate and our minds and hearts are turned toward God, and we have this great technique of Kriya Yoga, which is the jet airplane path, as opposed to the bullock cart path. We have this very quick path to God. When we combine all of those and the great blessings of this line of masters, then our soul is led inevitably to the fulfillment that we have been seeking forever. We're very, very fortunate to have this path, to have the teachings of Lahiri and Sri Yukteswar, Master and Babaji. We're very blessed to have a satsang where we can gather with other devotees, to have our desire to be reunited with God, to have that appreciated and enhanced and drawn up. And I bow again and again to these great masters.